And another thing that will cast a shadow is trees, and that's a topic my next guest cares about deeply. Lauren Oakes is the author of Treekeepers, The Race for a Forested Future. She joins us now with more on why we should all be thinking about trees a little bit more. So welcome to New Day.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, so let's start with a little science reminder for people. So tell us the benefits that trees provide people and other life on Earth.
Oh my gosh, we could spend a while on that. But
okay, 8 minutes, it's gone.
I mean, here in the urban context, you see on a daily basis, like the experience that you have walking down a street, the feeling you get around trees, there's those benefits, the recreational benefits. But then there's also really practical ones on the shade they provide, the cooling effect in the summer. They help remove air pollution. They help mitigate stormwater problems with the way they restore the soil. And they also obviously have a huge benefit in terms of carbon sequestration. And that's really what motivated this project, because there's been a lot of interest in recent years in planting more trees because of their ability to suck up carbon from the atmosphere.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about the realistic take on the role forests can play combating climate change as well.
Well, if anyone's following the news, you know, in the recent years, like 2020, 2019, 2021, kind of blew up. Everybody thought like this is the silver bullet, plant more trees, and that's going to solve climate change.
Yeah.
The truth of it is that, you know, trees play an enormous role on an annual basis in sucking up carbon and drawing it down from the atmosphere. And they can play more. But it isn't a silver bullet. Like it's like buckshot. We need many different strategies, a portfolio of solutions.
And talk about the differences between trees in remote forests compared to trees in urban areas too.
Oh yeah, well, it kind of brings to the heart, you know, the question, what is a forest? Which is like a philosophical question, a scientific one. There are about 800 definitions of what is a forest. You know, as an ecologist and someone who's spent a lot of time in forests, I've seen a whole range from secondary forests and timber forests to really biodiverse, you know, relatively intact forests in some of the most pristine pockets on the planet. And so, you know, the definition is really broad. We are in a forest now here in Seattle. Seattle has about 28% tree cover, and many people think of this as another form of a forest, the urban context.
Yeah, and talk about why growing and sustaining forests is more important and complicated than just like planting trees.
Yeah, the context is really important, but and it's, you know, kind of what leads to the title of tree keeping, is that everybody, you know, was interested in like the planting act, or there is this feeling that comes from doing the planting act. And how many of us have bought something, or I buy Christmas cards every year and they send me a notification saying you planted these trees somewhere. But really the act of, you know, the challenge is keeping them into the future and sustaining them and helping trees establish. One of your producers was just telling me a story about some neighborhood trees down the street here that look like they're going to be cut. They're kind of cracked through the sidewalk and they need to do some repair on the sidewalk. And you know, that kind of response is, typically the response is, well, we'll just plant new ones here, you know, but it took a long time for those trees to grow and to reach the magnificent canopy that they offer now.
Right. And what does the term tree equity mean to you when you hear that?
Tree equity. So this is something that I hadn't really learned that much about until I started researching this book. But tree equity is the idea that we should all have equitable access to the many benefits that trees provide. And there's definitely a movement in the United States and in various, you know, regions here in Seattle and Tacoma to look at how is that tree cover distributed. So if you think of, you know, a street in the summertime that doesn't have trees and is maybe 20 degrees hotter than one a few neighborhoods over that has a great tree cover, there's a huge equity issue surrounding, you know, the distribution of those benefits. Or maybe that community is paying more for their energy and cooling effects. There's been studies showing that schools that are surrounded by tree cover and have good tree cover, the test scores tend to be higher, and those are
interesting.
So there's a lot of benefits that come from trees, and they're not distributed equally in our communities, you know, in our urban communities across this country and others.
Yeah, and keeping everything that we talked about just in mind here, what do you hope for the future to improve just, you know, our environmental conditions?
Oh my gosh, such a great question. But I mean, again, going back to the title, is I felt like every one of us can play a role in tree keeping, and it isn't the solution. It isn't, you know, the one perfect thing we can do to make the planet better, but I do think the act of restoring a forest or the act of restoring even your own backyard has benefits mentally, physically to all of us and to our communities, but also has a lot of benefits for the environment into the future.
Gosh, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And just a reminder, you can catch Lauren at her author event tonight, Wednesday, January 29th at 7 p.m. at the Elliott Bay Book Company.